and we'll see if this works, Jan.
Okay.
So again, we'll introduce our next person, and again, we appreciate you being here and taking the time. So who's on
Sure.
deck, Claire?
Hi, Mr. Schlichtmann.
How are you?
I'm
I
Claire
got a little
Bauman.
cold I'm getting over, so excuse me if I
Oh, that's all
come up
right.
with a cough there. So, yeah.
Okay. I'm Claire Bauman, and I was wondering how you came back from this case.
Physically, emotionally, and psychologically?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this case was, this experience really was a bankrupting experience, financially and emotionally and spiritually. I lost everything. I had invested everything in the case. The case didn't turn out the way I had hoped or planned. For a long time, the case was nothing but pain, and I lost everything. I basically I lost all my physical, trophies. The car, the condo, the colleagues, the credit, the career. I had all those things, and I didn't want to be a lawyer anymore. It was a very devastating experience, and for a long time, I didn't want to think about the experience, although, of course, I was thinking about it constantly, having the tape replay in my mind. So it was very painful for a very long time. And then there just came a moment where I embraced the experience. And when I embraced the experience and realized that it had taught me a lot of things, everything changed. My attitude changed, what I saw changed, and I began to see things and wanted to share with other people the things that I saw. I saw some good things, bad things, and some ugly things in myself, in my fellow earth travelers, and how we're treating each other and how we're treating the earth, and how we go about the law and how we treat each other through the law. And so all those things fundamentally changed how I practiced law and how I saw my role in the world. So it was a very leveling experience, and that's how I came back. I came back by accepting the experience and understanding what it taught me. That it wasn't about losing something; it was really about gaining some wisdom, which I think I feel blessed for that. So I wouldn't change anything. And I certainly do things differently in my practice and how I approach the law and how I look at things. And that makes for a life that is still uncomfortable in many ways, but I wouldn't have it any other way. So I guess to answer your question is I did come back by appreciating what the experience taught me. And every day I try and apply those lessons. Sometimes I forget them and I'm reminded. But every day is really kind of mining of that experience for how I should go forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Schlichtmann.
Hi.
My name's Xavier. And to go along with what Claire asked you and how you were able to bounce back, were your coworkers able to bounce back too, or how are they doing now?
My two former partners are my two best friends, Kevin and Bill. And I work with Bill. Kevin has got a thriving practice having to do with vaccine cases and vaccine problems that are for children and others. So he has kind of a specialty practice. But I have still maintained contact with Kevin. In fact, I was just at BC Law School giving a talk with him to some law students about the experience of Woburn. Bill is a great friend, probably my best friend, and we work on cases together and enjoy the ups and downs of the practice of law. So they all survived the experience, and we all survived as friends as well, which is, I think, a really great testament to who and what Bill and Kevin are. And so that was a good thing. We went through this great experience together where we had a really thriving practice and felt we were on top of the world. And then we got involved in this case that, got us involved in a challenging experience that just took everything. And at the end of the day, we had to give up our practice, but not our friendship.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. All right.
Hi.
My name is Hollis Esposito, and I have a question about the Woburn case.
Yeah.
What do you think would have happened if you did not take on this case?
to me personally, what would have happened to me if I hadn't taken on the Woburn case?
Yeah.
Or what would have happened would someone have taken on the Woburn case? That's a good question. For me personally, if I hadn't taken on the Woburn case, I'm sure I would have probably got involved in something that would have engaged me somewhere, somehow, like the Woburn experience did. Just the nature of who and what I am, I guess. I can't help myself. I get into trouble a lot. So I probably would have taken up the cause of some group somewhere being abused. It just so happens that kind of, I don't know if you choose Woburn or Woburn chose me, but the two of us came together. And it's hard to. So I guess I would have gotten in trouble and gotten involved in some other kind of a thing. Whether it would have had the impact that Woburn did, I don't know. But Woburn is, as I say, my blessing and my curse. It really defined me, who and what I was, and I'm grateful for the experience and grateful for the representing these families, and was really fortunate that the families wanted to share this experience with the rest of the world, which allowed us to bring in like Jonathan Haar, an investigative journalist who decided to stay and turn it into a book. He never written a book before, and he wrote this really great book, a terrific book. It took him 9 years, but it's a fabulous book, and it's there isn't a day goes by I don't get some communication from somewhere in this country, around the world, about someone who has read the book or seen the movie, and they were inspired in some way by the experience. So that's great to have been associated with an experience with all these wonderful people who devoted so much time and energy to something really important to us. So it's hard to say what would have happened to me, or what would have happened when someone had taken up the cause of Woburn, or to take somebody like me. I guess we'll never really know unless there's some multiverse out there, and we ever get to experience that multiverse. We find out who else would have taken up the Woburn case, and what would have happened to them. I don't know. Good question.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Hi, Mr. Schlichtmann. My name is Michaela Schlesner, and I was wondering, did the movie accurately portray your story?
The answer is that it was a really great book and a pretty good movie. The book really got into the belly of the beast. And the great thing about the book is that it got into all aspects of what we were, and in particular, the journey into the science and the medicine. And that's the one failing, I think, of the movie. The movie focused on the liability issue, the dumping issue and the uncovering of all that, which was, a great story and great detective story. But the real good story, the important story, and the story that really kind of challenges powerful interests is, and it's what the families understood from the beginning, was showing that these chemicals, these waste products in water, can have a profound impact on public health. That's the one thing that the companies and corporate America and powerful interests are not particularly keen on having the rest of the world, appreciate. This was kind of brought home to me in the movie. The movie, at the end of the movie, it was going to have this little, at the end they have the coda that kind of talks about what happened to me and what happened to others. But at the end, in the beginning, the movie was going to have the coda that the Center for Disease Control and the Mass Department of Health determined that the families were right, and that the blight of cancer, the epidemic of cancer in Woburn, was related to the polluted water supply. Now, to the families, that was the most important message that they wanted to get out. But the movie concentrated on the liability of the companies, and not on the fact that these families were successful, against great odds, in actually showing a connection that there's a lot of economic self-interest in not seeing. That, in fact, these chemicals, when disposed of recklessly by companies, can get into water and can cause profound health effects. And the companies, when the movie was going to come out, lobbied very heavily, not to get the movie to change anything about the liability or the dumping, but to remove the coda at the end that said there was a connection between the water supply and the disease. And to Disney's discredit, they took that out. So that tells me something. And that's what the families understood from the beginning. This was about the truth, an ugly truth about ourselves and how we treat each other in the world. And unless we're willing to face this truth, that, the growing of things, the making of things, and the testing of things, when we do all these things and we do it really well, we make waste. And the chemical constituents of this waste, when we don't appreciate how they can impact our health, we get rid of them in ways that end up in our bodies, in our water supply, in future generations that threaten future generations. And so this to me is the most important lesson of Woburn. And it's the one that the families focused on. And it's the one that they dedicated their whole life to. They wanted Woburn to stand for something. They wanted the death of their children to stand for something, the sickness that they all suffered to stand for something. And what they wanted it to be was, we have to be honest about how we're treating each other and the earth. And if we're not going to have a future. And our children are our future. So to me, that's the most important thing. So the movie got it wrong. Didn't really focus on that, unfortunately. But the book really did. So I always encourage people to read the book if they like the movie. The movie gets the story out there and hopefully gets people interested in reading the book. But the ultimate message, I think, is better served by the book than the movie.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Hello, Mr. Schlichtmann.
Yes.
My name is Kayla, and I was wondering, how do you think the story affected the community?
Well, it's first of all, when the families, and there were only a few, who had this terrible disease, and they got together and they began to question what was happening in their community, the rest of the community wanted them to shut up. They didn't want them to talk about possible pollution problems with the water supply, because that could affect property values. Businesses didn't want them to do that. The political establishment didn't want them to do that. So the families had to stand up against their own community that really didn't want to hear what was going on, or even ask the questions, because they were afraid of the answers. So it affected the community that way. The fact that the family stuck to it, wouldn't take no for an answer, wouldn't accept easy questions, and certainly wouldn't accept the answer from the officials that they don't know whether who polluted the water, or whether that polluted water could have affected children's health. They wouldn't accept that answer, and they went out themselves, and they did some extraordinary things. One, of course, is they went and challenged a whole bunch of people, including myself, as lawyers, and my two partners, to come and help them get answers to the questions. And that challenge and what we did makes for a really great book and a pretty good movie. 1 second here. But the other thing that they did was they went down and they challenged other people. Ann Anderson and the other mothers went down to the Harvard School of Public Health, and they challenged the scientists there and said, the Center for Disease Control says nobody's ever done such a study. Would you come up and help us do such a study? And to their credit, a couple of those scientists did go up to Woburn with the families, and they created a first-of-a-kind voluntary study where the families and others in the community went around knocking on the doors and getting questions answered about whether there were children with cancer and the health histories. And that study, which was a private study done voluntarily with these great scientists from Harvard, became a study. It took 10 years to get it published in peer-reviewed journals, but it did. And the reason why it was being kept out was because there were powerful interests that didn't want that study, which became the first study of its kind to show a connection between polluted water and the blight of cancer. The first of its kind. It took 10 years to get into peer-reviewed journals, and it took another 10 years for a change of administration, the Clinton administration, replacing the Reagan-Bush administration, that did what? That looked at the data, redid the study, and said the families were right. There was a direct relationship between the exposure of children in utero, in the womb. Those children had a 13 times greater risk of contracting leukemia than those who were not exposed. That was the first study of its kind to make such a connection. First, it was the family's private study. Finally got into the peer-reviewed journals, and then the government agency that came by and said, yes, the families are right. That led, by the way, to another case I got involved with later, to Toms River, families down there in Toms River, New Jersey, who had 60 children with cancer and polluted water. much lower amounts in the water. And we were able to get together a Woburn-type study that then was that involved the federal government and the state health department, and they also concluded that, in fact, there was a relationship between the polluted water and the incidence of childhood leukemia, and that was the second study. So what the families had a profound, what they did, their courage, had a profound impact on their own personal community, certainly, so that this community now, Woburn, is very sensitive to environmental issues and is now willing to recognize the ugly truths. That had a profound local influence, but their influence, of course, through the book and the movie and the sharing of their story has had a worldwide influence, an inspirational influence to tell others that you should have the courage to stand up and find those answers to those very fundamental questions that will, the answer of which will determine what kind of future we have.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey Jen, I'm JB.
How you doing?
I know you touched on it earlier with Xavier's question. But did your colleagues ever see it from the people's side, the people's side of view instead of from the money standpoint?
Well, I'd like to say that, one can't so easily make these separations between what motivates people. We're all motivated. Human beings are motivated, from the good and the bad and the ugly. And I was motivated as an ambitious young lawyer by all those things. I was motivated by the children, clearly, the challenge, the legal challenge of a case never been done before, and the treasure, all of those things. Just like, people want to excel in science or medicine or literature. Maybe they have dreams of getting the Pulitzer Prize or the Nobel Prize. Well, is that, that's the good and the bad and the ugly. They want esteem, we all do. We want the accolades of others. We're very social beings. We want money, because with money we can do things, have a life that we want to have. So we're motivated by all these things, and I think we should be honest about that. And my problem is when we're honest about all the things that motivate us, then maybe we can accept the courage of people who did do things for good, bad, and ugly reasons that help advance our society. And rather than being kind of judgmental, because oftentimes what happens is powerful interests kind of exploit that prejudice. And oftentimes they will use the ugly of the motivation to delegitimize people who are standing up. They've done it to the families, they've done it to the lawyers who represented them. They've done it to the experts who were willing to stand up even when their colleagues were having a blind eye or not willing to put time or energy into answering questions about whether these chemicals can cause disease. And powerful interests oftentimes want to delegitimize people who are willing to stand up for good, bad, and ugly reasons altogether, and delegitimize them because of the ugly reasons. Oh, they're doing it because they want attention. Oh, they're doing it because of the money. We have to see past that, because human beings, complex, complicated as we are, we're all social beings. At the end of the day, we have to measure the actions that we take by whether it promotes the interests of the community. And if it does, I think we have to be a little less judgmental and a little more human about why people do what they do, so we can encourage more people to do it. Because wouldn't it be nice? It's almost a cop-out to say, well, the corporation is only interested in money. Well, wouldn't it be nice if we could look at how people get motivated, including corporations who are profit-driven, which creates all these incredible technological advances and great things. Isn't it great that they have that kind of release of energy and creativity? Wouldn't it be also great if it was also came with a sense of how can I harness it for the greater good, as opposed to just for profit?
Yeah.
And if we understand and are more accepting of all the different human elements, I think we can come up with policies that will encourage the advance of civilization by corporations, by communities, and by individuals, instead of trying to delegitimize various sectors of our society that all have to work together if we're going to have a safer, better, and a healthier future.
All right, sweet. Thanks for your time again.
My pleasure.
Hi, Mr. Schlichtman. I'm Ethan Putnam. Do you have any advice for students who are looking to kind of pursue a career in environmental law or something along that line?
Yeah, don't.
All right.
But if after saying don't, you still do, then here's the advice I give. And it doesn't matter whether you said, okay, I won't. You're going to go do something else with your life. Here's what I've come to appreciate. And here's the advice I would give the younger me, which I guess you're the stand-in for the younger me right now. Number one, the one thing I've learned is you have to be in a place that you love. You have to be in a place that speaks to you. I mean a physical place. Like every living thing, place is really important. And wherever that place is, that's where you need to be, at whatever stage in life you happen to be. So place is important, number one. When you're at such a place that you love, I would urge you to do the thing there that you also love. And that you engage yourself in activities that give you pleasure, that satisfy something deep in you, that speak to you. So being at a place that you love, doing something that you love, and I would also urge you to be there with someone you love. Now, if you're at a place that you love, doing what you love, with someone that you love, all of the problems and the challenges of the world, of which there will be many, you will be betrayed, you will fail, your ambitions will lead you down roads that, you didn't expect and take you to all sorts of different things that come into your life that may set you back. But if you're at a place that you love, doing what you love, with someone that you love, all of that stuff can be survived. If you don't, then life can really be quite miserable and last for a very long time as a miserable experience. But if you have those three things, life will be actually quite lovely. So I would urge you to, if my experience means anything, those are the three things that I learned.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
I'm back.
Yeah.
Have there been any cases of cancer due to the water since the companies have shut down?
Well, as a matter of fact, when the wells were shut down in 1979, it's a really wonderful question, because what happened was, you can see from the incidence of cancer, this spike of the wells went online in 1965, and when you plot the incidence of cancer in the community, you see the spiking of cancer over that 10 to 20-year periods when the wells were on. They were for 15 years, 1965 to 1979. And when you plot the incidence of cancer, you see the incidence of cancer coming several years after the wells open, and then it reaches a peak right in the early 1980s, a few years after the wells were turned off, and then it dramatically declines, so it was below the background level. Pretty dramatic evidence, to me, for sure, that the wells had an impact, because you can plot that. And that plotting of that, I think, is very, very revealing. So to answer your question, when the wells were closed down, that incidence of cancer dramatically decreased below background levels.
Okay.
I think another indication that, in fact, the wells were responsible for the incidence of cancer.
All right, thank you.
Hello, Mr. Schlichtman. My name is Bailey Ritter, and I have a question for you. I know that once you gave your case over to the EPA, they continued and fought and found a victory eventually for this case. I was wondering, do you ever regret giving it to the EPA, or did you just feel it was just time to give it over to someone?
Well, I'm going to change it a little bit. I know what actually happened here was that the families, the wells were found to be contaminated. And the way they were found to be contaminated is very interesting. The EPA was a young agency. It was just founded in the early 1970s. The wells, the EPA, as part of their early work, decided to send grants around to various states to test the water, because water had not been tested up till then for chemical contamination, for industrial pollution. They gave a grant to a little community of Lawrence, a testing laboratory in Lawrence, Massachusetts. And the first vial of water that they tested happened to be from Woburn. And that vial tested positive for these solvents. That led to the closing of the wells.
Gotcha.
And a whole bunch of questions to the community about how long they've been polluted, who polluted them, and has it impacted our health. It was the families that demanded answers to those questions. They challenged the EPA to come in, and to EPA, to their credit, did tests and determined that the wells were contaminated with these chemicals, but they couldn't really tell. There were indications that there were W.R. Grace and Beatrice Foods nearby, but they never came to that conclusion, that it was actually those companies. And I believe that they didn't come to those conclusions, not because of the data, but for other reasons.
Right.
That wasn't enough for the families. The families also challenged the Center for Disease Control and the Department of Health. They said, look, we, the families, had counted the numbers of children with this disease. There were too many. Was the water responsible? The Center for Disease Control, Department of Public Health, also counted the numbers of children and concluded there were too many, but said, well, we can't tell whether the water is responsible. That's how it was left when the families decided that wasn't sufficient. And then they went to others, as like I say, to the Harvard School of Public Health, and they also went to others, including me and my two partners. And what we ended up doing in taking on the case was deciding to put a lot of time and energy and money into the science and the technology and the engineering to show there was a connection between the pollution and not only that how the properties got contaminated, which took a huge amount of investigation, but then it took a whole bunch of geology and geoengineering to find out the polluted sites, then travel to the wells, and then a whole bunch of engineering to determine where did the water go in the community, and a whole bunch of other investigation to determine the medical records of the families and others to determine how their health changed over time. We did all of those things, and we didn't just look at the children with cancer. We brought in toxicologists and immunologists, cardiologists, neurologists, neuropsychologists, and a psychiatrist, mostly for me and my two partners. We brought in all those ologists to look at the family's health histories, not just the children, but everybody. And what we found was a pattern of problems, health problems, that one would associate with solvent poisoning. Not just in the children with cancer, but with others. And that ended up in peer-reviewed scientific journals. So there was this huge investment of time and energy and resources that no government agency, no institution of higher learning, and no corporation had until then ever invested. The ones who did it were the families and their three lawyers, well-meaning and maybe slightly deranged lawyers who did that. I think we're the better for it because we learned a lot.
Right.
But for us to rely on the families and some lawyers, misguided though they may be, to do all that, I don't think I think we need more than that. And hopefully our story, the family story, will inspire governments and institutions of higher learning and corporations to invest the time and energy and resources, which they have a lot more of, because communities like Woburn and individuals like Ann Anderson, Mary Toomey, and Donna Robbins, all of the families, if we inspire each other to invest these resources, then we may prevent this behavior and also come up with the technologies that can protect us from this behavior.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Okay, well that wraps up the individual questions. But you from watching your movie, you have inspired our class to try something ourselves. So we're actually going to be going down the Mississippi River and testing for pharmaceutical drugs that are in the water.
That is fantastic, and that is a whole area. Again, like Woburn, if you don't look, you're not going to find.
Yeah.
And if you look, at least you have a chance of finding. And if we, like Rachel Carson, you know, she looked where people didn't really look. She looked at the air and the earth and the water, all the places that life takes root. And when she looked at these places, and she was the first one to look with clear eyes, she found things that didn't belong there. Things from the growing of things, the making of things, and the testing of things, chemicals and radioactive breakdown products. And she thought that these would form a sinister partnership that could eat away at the fabric of life. So I urge you, I hope that you will have great luck going down your journey down the river and seeing if there are things in there we should be concerned of that shouldn't be in there. And commend you for willing to take that journey. It's a really important journey for all of us. So I think it's inspirational that you're willing to do that, you and your colleagues.
Well, thank you. Can you tell us a little bit about the paper plate project that you're working on now?
That happens. What it is it's an antitrust case against several of the manufacturers of polystyrene food service products. You know, those clamshells and school lunch trays and things like that made out of polystyrene. Or you go to a restaurant, a takeout, they'll put it often in a foam polystyrene package, and then you'll eat your food in about 5, 10 minutes, 15 tops, and then you'll take the dirty container and you'll do what with it? You'll put it in a trash bin. The problem is that there's been over the last 10 years a huge change in institutions in changing from having things that you have to wash and having labor to deal with plates and silverware and all that stuff and glassware, and going away from that to disposables. And the problem with that, of course, is it's very convenient for the user, very convenient for the institution. But you're talking about taking huge quantities of material on a daily basis, going where? Going into the landfill. So we represent a guy who thought that was not a good use of resources. We should at least be reclaiming a lot of this stuff and recycling it back into the stream and using it as and producing a recycled polystyrene foam product. And our case is against the industry. We say that they ganged up on him and basically forced him out of the market, not allowing him to profit. And that was a group decision. That case will probably go to trial sometime next year. But what I like about the case is, and the reason that I attracted to it, was again, it was about an individual willing to stand up to an industry and a creative, innovative person who said, why don't we do things this way that might actually be a little better for everybody, for the schools and for the community, and really for the companies, because they'll have a better, more socially acceptable product. What's happening now is people are trying to ban these products, and it may be that is probably the best way to deal with this, is to just basically say, you can't have these single-serve, products that we have to go dispose of in huge quantities because we just can't afford, the landfill space. We just got to come up with a better way of having a food service product that doesn't cause such a major landfill problem. That might be the only reason, and the fact that the industry has not been responding in a creative, innovative way, and on the contrary has been, what we say in our case, drowned out, at least one attempt to try to change things, I think will probably end in the industry going the way of the dinosaurs. Because if they don't adapt and they don't hear the voices crying out about the burgeoning landfills, then I think the response politically and socially and legally is going to be, we're just not going to tolerate that product. It just has too many problems. So that's one of several projects I'm involved in, and that you can see some themes running through there, I'm sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
All right, thank you.
Well, Mr. Schlichtmann, I more than appreciate your time. You obviously are truly an inspiration to us, and these kids are very appreciative that you took your very, very valuable time and allowed them to at least speak to you and answer a few questions that might propel them into the rest of their life. And so I can't be more thankful for that.
Well, it was a great pleasure for me, and I'm inspired by all the work that you're all doing there. And you have just, proven again, as I hear the incredible accomplishments you've made, the power that one individual and a few individuals and a small group of individuals influencing others to take, how little actions can become big actions that really are good for all the rest of us. So I commend you and I applaud you, and I hope you all the very, very best in these endeavors. You're an inspiration.
Thank you again, sir, and we wish you the best too. And we will be definitely keeping track of the case that you're working on now, and hopefully sometime in the future we'll have the opportunity to speak again.
That'd be wonderful. You good, lots of good luck to all of you. Thank you.
Have a great day.
Yeah, take care.
He lives in